The Craig Foley Show on Deadline Detroit is made possible in part by Lynette's Shrimp House, located in Highland Park. It's Metro Detroit's premier destination, serving juicy fried shrimp, fish, and wings, alongside soul food sides and new additions to the menu like turkey tacos and desserts. Located at 13548 Woodward in Highland Park, just north of the Davidson, Lynette's is open for takeaway, noon to 8 Tuesday and Thursday, noon to 10 p.m. Friday and Saturday, and noon to 5 p.m. on Sunday. Call now, get some Lynette's. Hey, greetings, everybody. Happy Friday. Welcome to the week that was on Deadline Detroit. I am your host, Craig Foley. We're going to break down all the important stories of the week. And as usual, I have a lot of help to do that. As always, Alan Lengel, editor and co-founder of Deadline Detroit, is with us. Hello, Alan.
Hey, Craig. How are you?
Nancy Derringer, Deadline contributor, is with me as well. Hello.
Hey.
And back again, Nancy Kaffer of the Detroit Free Press editorial board. We always appreciate you being here.
Pleasure to be here.
And Portia Roberson, CEO of Focus Hope, is with us once again. Glad to see you as well.
Thank you for having me, a non-journalist with all the journalists.
Well, but that's okay. You know, we sometimes need we need outside perspective because journalists get lost in our own world way too often. You know, so we don't want to do that. That would be boring for everybody else. But you know, I wish I had some big funny thing to start with today, but I don't. I mean, the big story that came out yesterday was the death of Coach John Geddert, who had just announced that 24 felonies were going to be, he's being indicted on 24 felonies, 20 counts of human trafficking and forced labor, 2 counts of sexual assault, racketeering, and lying to police. Of course, this all connected to the Larry Nassar scandal at Michigan State University and the USA gymnastics program. And of course, he killed himself at a rest stop in Charlotte. And this is just a horrible end to what has been a horrible story all the way around. I mean, everything about this has been bad. And you look at it, and I'm not sure what to think about this because, yes, this guy was facing a lot of penalties, and he was going to have to face the music. You know, suicide is a really strange way to do this, and I'm not sure how I would feel if I were one of the victims. I'm just trying to sort of wrap my head around whether or not this is a good, bad thing, or is just awful all the way around.
It's a bad thing. Let me just make it easy for you. It's a bad thing. It's you know, it's not even close to being a good thing. It you know, it robs the survivors of, you know, their moment of confrontation. It robs the greater society of the ability to put this guy on trial and you know, try to show just how terrible this behavior was. I mean, but I'm not surprised he took that way out. I was reading the story in the news this morning, the Detroit News this morning, about all the things that he supposedly did. The culture, it wasn't individual acts so much as it was the culture of the gym that he ran for gymnastics, and it was awful. I mean, I do not understand why every elite sport has to be like this. I mean, what are we gaining from this? I mean, I know winners and Olympics and yada yada, but I mean, it seems like gymnastics and women's gymnastics in particular is just a horror show. I mean, you know, those dancing girls from UCLA seem to be the only ones that are having a good time.
I mean, and then of course to add on into all that, you know, the football, like the Penn State, I mean, football has had its own problem. And then even within that, there are the issues we know about that aren't abuse, but are considered a normal part of the sport, the traumatic head injuries associated with football that don't really seem to have set the world on fire. I mean, I've heard stories for years about the damaging practices that boys who are in high school wrestling engage in to qualify for weight categories that lead to eating disorders and other problems. There's a lot of harmful things. I mean, those again are not things that are abuse or crimes. They're just considered sort of normal parts of the sport, in addition to the criminal acts that we're talking about at the gymnastics program.
Go ahead, Alan.
I think we see a lot of these different sports where kids are like 6 years old and their parents are pushing them already, playing hockey and all the sports and gymnastics, particularly we see that, but we see that at such a young age, and these kids are really tormented, and the parents are sort of carrying out their wishes of what they're living vicariously through their children, and at the same time screwing them up.
Go ahead, Nancy. You're about to say
I was just going to say, and we can't figure out how to react to this. Why is Tiger Woods Tiger Woods? Because of his father. His father who groomed him from diapers to be a golf prodigy. Why is Serena Williams Serena Williams? Because of their father. And when they're winning, it's great. But when Tiger Woods turns out to be some kind of sex addict, tabula rasa with no personality because he's done nothing for his entire life but play golf, then it's a terrible thing. And it's like, well, maybe we need to find some point in between these things, these extremes. I mean, I'm just really glad that my daughter chose the arts because in Grosse Pointe where I live, it's either your kid either does the arts or they do sports, and there are terrible parents in both. And fortunately, she went a whole different path.
Well, I think what you should say is, thank goodness I'm not a terrible parent, because I'm sure that, like you said, any particular parent who's too obsessed with their child's success at the expense of their child's health, can probably make the arts miserable, can make anything miserable. So so stopping to see your child as a unique person as opposed to an extension of your own ego is kind of an issue there. But then there are certainly a lot of children who are very interested in a sport or very, committed to something like that. And so how do you draw the line between making sure that you're supporting your child and giving them the opportunities and not, again.
Them. I wonder if part of it is, though, and we were talking about this yesterday. I was talking about this yesterday. It's particularly with gymnastics and these sports where you kind of send your children off to live somewhere without their parents necessarily. Is that is the sport so elite? Is the need to, I guess, perform at that level? Maybe that's driving this idea that a parent would send their child off to live with a family, and that family, to a certain extent, is very different than your parents. And so there's more opportunity to take advantage of these young women usually than it would be. I mean, I know we've had instances, like you said, Penn State, Nancy, but it just seems to me that it puts these girls in such a vulnerable position when they are like leaving their home states and going to these programs. And there's not necessarily, and I don't say that, a parent would always catch it, because obviously in certain instances they did not. But it just, I mean, I don't know that this is even the end of this thing with Larry Nassar. Like, I don't know if are we done now? Is there more to come?
Well, I do want to say that, I'm sorry, really quickly, that most children who are molested by a close relative, in or near their home. So, I mean, I think that I understand what you're saying. It does seem like that the lack of supervision, but it's really the culture around all that. But I mean, being in the home under the supervision of a parent doesn't necessarily guarantee that these things aren't going to happen. In fact, most children who are molested are in that circumstance, not in a program of some kind.
My concern here, though, is that, there's an opportunity being lost with Gettert, taking his own life. We're not going to necessarily get to the bottom of everything that went there. I mean, does it just go away, or does Dana Nessel still lay out her case for the public to say, hey, here's what we found, so that we actually can have a conversation about the culture around these sports and the culture around these institutions that, obviously this is happening more often than we'd like to think, given the examples we've just rattled off here. We didn't even mention the U of M doctor, that was came out there the other day. Do we need to make sure that we still follow everything, go down this rabbit hole and find what's down there?
I think, if you put out you release the documents, whatever on the case. I mean, I don't think, I mean, look, this is so, when we talk about the gymnastics culture, I mean, it is so deeply ingrained. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, you go weekends, like children are traveling different places. And I think some get caught up in that. And some of the coaches are jerks. I played on the school team 7th, 8th, 9th grade, and some of the coaches are just jerks. We played Hazel Park junior high in 7th grade. We were the champions, playing for the championship, and we lost the game. And after the game, we got on the bus, and we had some of the guys who were like they called them the Peyton boys. They were like they sang Temptation song, and we were all clapping and stuff. And the coach started screaming at us, "You guys should be crying, not laughing and having fun. You just lost." Well, and I was like, this is not for me.
Well, that's exactly when I quit baseball, right? I knew I wasn't going to be a professional baseball player. I wasn't even going to play in high school. And I'm sitting there playing in Little League, getting yelled at my coach because I wasn't that good of a baseball player. And I'm thinking to myself, what's the point of this? I'm not ever going to play sports competitively for anything that matters.
Oh, come on.
It's true. I played intramural sports after that and had a blast. Loved every second of it. We didn't care.
And you'll be surprised to hear that my child is what we might call indoorsy. But I try to sign him up for soccer when he was younger. I signed him up for basketball. I signed him up for various things, karate, and he doesn't really enjoy them. Yeah. And he did karate for a lot longer than anything else, but he got tired of that eventually. And the question is but when you have a child who's taking karate or something like that, and they start to say they don't want to go, it's like, all right, for the first while, you're like, no, we're going. We've got to, you don't want to, the first time a kid says, I don't want to do this sport anymore, you don't go, all right, we're done. But, then at some point, like Craig, if you don't believe that your child is destined to become, the karate All Valley champ, All Valley meet champ,
Cobra Kai.
It's like, what are we, what are we doing this for? It's supposed to be a fun hobby, not a life commitment. And, so we dropped out of karate. Though I strongly encourage anyone in Detroit who has a child to check out PKSA Detroit, because Miss Jen is a fantastic karate teacher, and it's not her fault my child lost interest. So, PKSA Detroit.
Okay. And the check to Alan Langle at Deadline Detroit.
No, but every parent, you have to decide, what is the line between you're just feeling lazy today, keep doing it, push past the bad stuff, and oh, you have a broken ankle, well, suck it up, kid. It's like you have to obviously there's a big gulf between that, but you know where it is for your kid, and that's part of knowing who your kid is. But I do think coaching maybe is just slowly starting to change, maybe not in gymnastics, but in some other sports. Having lived through the firing of Bobby Knight in Indiana, of course, Indiana went insane over that. But, the bottom line was, if you talk to a person who is educated about that level of collegiate sports, is they said it wasn't just that he yelled at kids and that he, pushed them around and threw chairs and all that. It's like he was missing prospects because, there were some great college basketball prospects who were giving IU a pass because they didn't want to play for a guy like that. That was the era when Phil Jackson was running the Chicago Bulls through Buddhism and yoga and all this
meditation.
Stuff. I'd rather do some yoga than have some guy scream at me.
Oh, a chair at me.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Well, Woody Hayes, right?
He punched the kid.
Yeah.
He punched the kid.
Yeah, he was
from the opposing team. Well, absolutely. But anyway, you mentioned Tiger Woods, Nancy, earlier. Yeah. And for the first couple of days of this week, you turn on cable news, it was all about Tiger Woods' accident that he had. And as somebody who plays golf and likes to watch professional golf on television, yes, I'm old. It was, it's disappointing to see this, because this is a guy who probably is never going to be able to play at that level ever again as a result of this. This accident was pretty horrific. Fortunately, it doesn't look like there was anything more than just his personal error here. There was no substance or anything like that they could tell. But did this warrant the wall-to-wall coverage it got for a couple of days? Portia's just shaking her head.
No, it was like they were waiting on it to be more tragic than it was. I felt like we were I was shocked when I woke up in one of the morning shows that sent their anchor person out to California, I guess overnight, to cover this first thing in the morning. I'm like, he had a car accident. Yes, it's Tiger Woods. And yes, we understand that his golf career may be over, although I'm not sure of that. Who knows with Tiger Woods? he,
That's a compound fracture.
That ankle problem
ankle's
alone.
gonna be a little.
Never be able
he
to
was
shift that
already
weight.
at the end of his career, and he was already kind of starting to battle that. I think it's done.
It's done.
I think it was interesting.
Yeah.
I am uniquely unqualified to weigh in on this because I didn't realize I didn't
Sports
realize
balls. I told you we were going to talk sports balls.
I didn't realize he still played golf. So,
okay. Well, there's
I started watching that, and I was like, at some point, I'm like, okay, let's move on. The guy didn't die, and then they're talking about they're getting people on there saying what a great guy is, and going through the history of his career, and just going on and on. And I get it if he had passed, but he had a car accident. I mean, a severe one, but nonetheless. I mean, it was crazy, but that's cable obsessiveness. When I was at the Washington Post, I had a driver pick me up at the paper, take me over to Fox News. They put on all my makeup, and I was sitting there, and there was a plane in Boston that had to land without the wheels coming down. And so, they said, oh, there's going to be a little delay on you going on. And so I'm listening and on, and they get all these experts, and these experts are saying, not that big of a deal. I mean, the plane landed safely, and they went on and on. And I'm sitting in the studio, and they go, it's going to be another 20 minutes. I said, okay. I go, yeah. But I said, what are you guys doing? I said, the guy said it's not a big deal. Why are you making such a big deal out of it? And that's cable.
Tales of a print journalist, not the TV guy, clearly, because if they got video of any kind of plane trouble, that's going to dominate for weeks at a time. But
I ended up getting canceled. They said, we're going over. Sorry. And I walk out into the newsroom, and they say, hey, Mr. Lango, would you like to come back tomorrow? I go, no. They go, I hate Fox News anyway.
Well, this is why I don't regret cutting the cable cord. I mean, my husband has a really short fuse with those kind of stories where it's the same video over and over again.
Over again.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, so.
Well, let's talk about some things that actually did happen that the newspapers covered this week, which I think were really important. I want to talk a little bit about what we've been witnessing in Washington this week first. When it comes to the confirmation hearings for a number of appointees in the Biden administration, Neera Tanden is likely to not be confirmed for her position. And because of quote unquote nasty tweets that she sent in the past. And I see all this hand wringing going on by people like Joe Manchin and Lisa Murkowski and everybody
Susan
else
Collins,
is saying, Susan Collins saying, Joe Biden said we're going to go back to a bipartisan cooperative world. And these mean tweets are enough to disqualify somebody who's got supreme qualifications for the position, by the way, because she said mean things. And I'm like, you wed yourself to Donald Trump for 4 years and still are basically kowtowing to today, Mitch McConnell, which we'll talk about a little later. But I'm sorry, Neera Tanden's qualified for this job. There was a piece in the Washington Post this morning saying, why is this a position that needs to have Senate approval anyway? That's an interesting debate.
It's interesting with Joe Manchin, who suddenly, he comes from West Virginia. It's not the biggest state. He's not the most prominent Democrat. In fact, some look at him as sort of a marginal Democrat. Mm-hmm. And now he is in the power seat because he's sort of a swing vote now. And it's really kind of shameful, but that's politics.
I think it's just astounding. I also think pointing out sort of hypocrisy that just is not really productive because I don't think they care. But I also do think she should have been a little smarter about managing her Twitter feed if she hoped to return to public life. I think we all know that these strange set of rules or rather lack of rules that Donald Trump had no obligation to follow and for whom anyone else would have ended their career multiple times over for any of the mildest thing that he did. I think everybody understands that those rules only apply to Trump for some reason. We're not in a world where, I guess that's good, right? That we haven't just completely stopped having rules. But
funny how the rules only apply to
women. Right. Well, I was going to say, Craig, I have to go because I have to go clean up my Twitter feed right now. And I have a plan on returning for a governmental administration right now. I'm never getting considered. Let's just say I just had to change my career course right now when I saw that.
I'm agreeing there's a double standard. There's no question there's a double standard, but we know there's a double standard. And so I think it's I don't know. Does it make it right? No, but it is. So, I mean, and there's specifically, actually, it's not even a double standard. There was a special Trump standard where he could say the worst things in the world, and it's, a plus, not a negative, for the people who like him, and which is not me. Yeah, I don't know. But yes, it is absolutely absurd that there's this. A president should get his appointees that absent some completely.
Well, the interesting thing was, I looked at some of the things that she said. Yes, they were sharp. They were sharp critiques of some of the things, but she wasn't calling anybody a horse face. She wasn't saying they were ugly. Accusing anybody of outlandish things. They were just really, really sharp critiques of positions that people had taken. And I mean, I guess it's out there in public, but these are things that people would say in private all the time. And so this new standard is seemingly strange. And maybe she's just the sacrificial lamb this time around, because every administration, there's at least one person that gets shot down just to satisfy the bloodlust of the other party. Is she that this time around?
We had to live with 4 years of Betsy DeVos. And,
right.
Well, and Ben Carson, who was in no respect qualified in any way, shape, or form for the thing he was appointed to do.
Right.
And
yeah, if there was a sacrificial lamb, I would have rather seen one of those two go. But anyway.
Well, I
guess ours was what, Michael Flynn. What was the scalp that the Democrats got early in the
probably Flynn.
Era? Yeah. Flynn.
Well, deservedly so.
Maybe.
I mean,
right?
Yeah. He was.
You take a look at that one.
Mean tweets there, but yeah.
The other one that I'm really, really interested in watching is Representative Deb Haaland, who's running, or actually has been appointed as the Director of the Interior. And of course, she's the first Native American to be appointed to a position in federal government like this. And there are a number of people that are genuinely afraid of what she might bring to the table. You listen to the people from Wyoming and Utah, the Republicans, it's as if they think that the Native Americans are going to kick them all off the land and take it back. I mean, it's the same sort of argument that you heard back in the 60s as in opposition to the Civil Rights Act, where they just assumed that there was going to be some sort of revenge taken on white America for their past sins. And I hope that she gets through, because I think she's uniquely qualified to do this job and brings a perspective to this position that we've never seen in the federal government. It seems beyond the time that these vast swaths of federal land, which the Department of the Interior oversees, are maybe overseen by somebody whose, roots go back there thousands of years.
I think it's part of the burden that anyone who's a historic first carries is normalizing their right to exist in that space, and facing that fear that they're going to, like you said, people are genuinely frightened because she might fly off the handle and do something wild. But that's part of the burden that she's asked to carry, and it's a very brave and really worthy of all of our respect that she's taking that on and plowing that course, plotting that course, carrying through that course, and hopefully it's a little bit easier for the person who follows behind her. And I think that's unfortunate that this is how it works, but I think that is, we should all recognize that this is part of what we ask women, people of color to do in these spaces.
But I also, while applauding her bravery, want to be very specific in that the people who are afraid are racist and sexist. Like, let's just not let them off the hook by saying that she has to carry the burden of bravery, because I want them to carry the bravery or the burden of their racism and their sexism in coming out. Like, seriously, oppose her because you're afraid she might take back land that you stole, that your ancestors stole to begin with. Like, I mean, let's just be honest. So, let's go back to, I agree. I think that oftentimes, I think she is courageous to keep moving in this direction. But I also think that, like, the people who would, it astounds me that people would put that out there and try to couch it in something else that is not their own racism and sexism.
I completely agree with you. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is we need to add to our respect for her service by understanding that she faces a burden that other people who've been in that role don't face, and that she's taking it on because I would assume she knows that this is, I'm going to say she knows, but I don't have that inside information. This is part of her her work. And like I said, I respect that tremendously, even though, yeah, I mean, I completely agree with you. It's racism and sexism. And
I'm just shocked. I really am shocked that like, that I shouldn't say shocked. I guess, it constantly disappoints me that no matter what happens and how much we say we're going to like change, like this is, like last year we really thought after George Floyd's murder, like things were going to change. People are going to be very conscious of like their biases and anti-racism and all these opportunities to like do better. And then like, things happen and then, people go right back to their norms, right? They go right back to the same biases, racism, tropes, sexism, all of that stuff just comes right back. I mean, it hasn't even been, a year? And we're back at like people talking about like, we're afraid that she might, steal back the land or like Nancy said, do something wild. Like, what's she going to Department of Material?
Well, we just had,
like,
you mentioned George Floyd. We got to go to Sterling Heights real quick. We're skipping around a little bit. A police officer in Sterling Heights posted a picture of George Floyd with the police officer on his knee. And the caption of the picture was, "When you're changing a tire and don't want your pants to get dirty." And so, of course, he has been suspended. I think has he been fired at this point or just suspended as they do an investigation?
Suspended without pay, but not fired yet.
Yeah. But I mean, clearly law enforcement still has some freaking issues to work through. And we've got this incident that we had in Grosse Pointe Park that was all over with the KKK flag and the response from the police there. We're like, well, the guy made a poor choice. No, we need to do something about this. And I mean, it's going to keep happening. It's going to keep happening. And the longer we want to just sort of put it in the rearview mirror and hope it just kind of goes away, it's not going to happen. And Sterling Heights, which has been called Sterling Whites for many, many years now, Grosse Pointe Park in particular has had a lot of high-profile incidents of racial animosity. This has got to change. I mean, and we keep just pretending that, well, the racism's not there. I mean, they're trying to move on beyond just what happened on January 6th already.
It's funny. I was on 9:10 a.m. I think it was last Saturday, and we were talking about the KKK flag, and one of the co-hosts was like, "Oh, come on, it happens everywhere. It happens in Detroit. It's not." And I go, "Yes, but we have to scream at the top of our lungs when it happens, so that it's not okay, that it's not normal."
Okay, but where are the other? Was this person saying a KKK flag has been displayed in other places and in Detroit?
There was some other type of hate, like racist thing. It might have been the N-word or something.
I just want to say, I'm from Alabama, and this was literally the first time I have seen a KKK flag in my life. I mean, this is not a
the norm
for people for whom the Confederate flag isn't racist enough. They've got to like dig out that KKK flag.
And this guy just seemed to have one.
Right.
Laying around in your storage container.
Somebody said to me the other day, we were arguing about this online, which is why I should just,
I don't know.
I just got to keep smacking myself in the head till I stop doing this. But just said, well, hey, just because he has a KKK flag doesn't mean he belongs to the KKK. And I said, what? Well, hold on a second. Well, okay, he just happened to stop at the KKK gift shop and decided, hey, I joined the KKK and all I got was this lousy flag. I mean, what's going on here?
Doesn't Cracker Barrel sell those?
I mean, I think that whether the man is a dues-paying member of the KKK is really completely immaterial to the question. It's the I mean, anyone who's putting a swastika on things probably isn't legitimately a member of the Third Reich, but they're definitely, that doesn't somehow absolve that act of all of the threat and toxicity and harm. Why are people so awful? There's our next one.
Why are people so awful?
What's scary? I think what's scary about both of these situations is, as you said, Craig, the police department's response in Grosse Pointe Park to Jadana and what had happened to her, what her neighbor did, and also to, Sterling Heights, because again, and I do think that the police chief in Sterling Heights had a better response, obviously. But, one of the things he said, and this is why we feel this way, is that this is why there's such a distrust of people of color to police officers, because we know this exists. Like, I guess I'm less worried about, in the Grosse Pointe Park case, I'm less worried about the neighbor doing it, because we're not going to ever go in and be able to stop one person's idea of they want to have a KKK flag in their house and they want to display it or whatever. But I'm really concerned still with the fact that we have all of this in these police departments. The idea that it was just a poor choice on his part, or, this guy is, clearly stopping cars. And this is exactly how the George Floyd incidents happen, because these are the people that they're getting on their police force that do these kind of things or downplay when these things happen in their ranks. And
Greg,
yeah.
Greg Bowen had a good column for Deadline a couple weeks ago about how it's time to add to proactively add police of color to the all 5 Grosse Pointe police.
Of course. I've actually am working on a column about this very situation. So check freep.com this weekend. They've literally never had a Black police officer in the history of the department, and they have one woman.
At the park?
Yeah, Grosse Pointe Park. Okay. Yeah. And at some point, we're at a point in 2021 where we don't really normally have to argue about the need for diversity. At least on paper, almost everyone accepts that diversity is important. But then when you look at a community and in their entire history, they border Detroit, and they've never had a Black officer. Why is that? You have to ask this question. Even when you're talking about it, if you're saying you agree with it on paper, how do you get to this situation where you have not one Black person in your
I can answer that very succinctly, and it's for a long time. Police chiefs tend to come and stay in the Grosse Pointes because it's a pretty low stress job compared to, say, a more action packed city. And for a long time they had kind of a jerk running the public safety department there, and
who's now the city manager in another community, right? Or you're talking about a different jerk?
I don't know if I think he actually retired, but okay. It's the same thing.
Sorry, my apologies to the city manager guy.
But it's it's funny that you're talking about Grosse Pointe Park this way, because the park really prides itself on its wokeness among all
the most diverse of the points, for sure.
Right.
Well, but I think my question of how did you get there was more rhetorical, because the point is that you have at some point to say this is intentional. This is not. This is a constructed space. This isn't like it just happened this way. There are things that went into. Also, another question: why is it's the most diverse of the points, but it's still. Given that it is a community known for its attractive amenities and its good schools, and it shares a border with the city that has lost more than 1 million residents, 1.5 million or close to, I guess 1.4 million over the last several decades. We look at a place, like Southfield, where the population has significantly diversified. And that really hasn't happened in Grosse Pointe. And that's another question to ask: is why? This isn't an accident. It's. Black families didn't not move to the Grosse Pointes because they didn't want good schools and nice parks. Like, there's a reason why Black families haven't moved to the Grosse Pointes in significant numbers. So anyway, I'm sorry. It's just
once you've been profiled in the Talbots, as I was in 2014, you stopped going.
I remember that.
That's right. That was me.
There's a lot of people who grow up here. I'm not from here. So a lot of people who grow up here, I think, and white people who grow up in predominantly white suburbs don't question this, because they just think, oh, it just didn't happen. People just didn't want to move here. And it's like, but why? Like, if your family moved there because they like those good schools and the great neighborhoods and whatever. All people want good schools and great neighborhoods.
I grew up in Oak Park, which was on the west side, which was predominantly Jewish, and to us, Grosse Pointe was like another country. It was like, Jews weren't allowed, Blacks weren't allowed in there, and it was just like such a foreign part that the Fords and whoever else lived there, but it was nothing. It was just a different world.
Well, I have adult friends now who have lived in Detroit in the metro area for forever, and they had never driven to Grosse Pointe. Like, they never, they are, even now, you take them there and they're like, I've never been over here. Like, they're from Southfield.
Really to see over here. The lake is nice, but the shopping is terrible. The restaurants are just
get
average.
bagels at a number of places.
That's right.
The thing
Einstein.
But the thing we need to all think when we see these exclusive spaces is to understand, again, that they don't happen coincidentally. They're intentionally designed that way. And that's, I think, a thing that you don't think about, because if you're used to the way things are, you've been in this very segregated metro area your whole life. Sometimes it's hard for people to see that. And I think that it is a thing that we have to hammer home all the time. This is intentional. This isn't, things don't just happen.
The point system?
I do know about the point system, and I know about.
Well, that was talk about intentionality. That was, that was 60 years ago now, but still.
And even more like, it was just recently that they abandoned the practice of having an anonymous tip line where parents could call and report that they felt a student was in the schools dishonestly, and then they would investigate whether or not that student
had real
belonged there.
residency. Yeah,
I think they recently abandoned that. One of you guys might know, was it the last year or two? I mean, to me, that's a toxic community.
I had
when you're encouraging your neighbors to report that their child's schoolmates don't belong. That's toxic, guys. That's bad.
My son had been in that district for his entire life, basically, and we had to re-enroll him somewhere in like the end of middle school because they were redoing every single person in the district just to catch those few, quote unquote, stragglers, as they called them, in one of these school board meetings. So anyway, we have to move on, but I don't want to get off this subject entirely because we are witnessing some hearings going on in Washington as well over what happened at the Capitol on January 6th. And it's amazing how we're getting a whole lot of whataboutism that is going on in these hearings from the Republicans, especially saying, well, it shouldn't just be about what happened at the Capitol. It should be about political violence around the country and what happened when the Black Lives Matter movement was going on as well. Because clearly they don't want to talk about the elephant in the room. And that is, of course, the fact that white supremacists were working to overthrow the government at the request of Donald Trump. They do not want that to be the subject matter here.
Well,
I'm hoping they don't get away with papering this over.
I think we should be able to equate taking over the Capitol, trying for an insurrection, to smashing a window at the Gap. I see.
Same thing.
Yeah, same thing.
Speaking of bad cops, can we at least also point out how many of the Capitol Police that day were, if they weren't actively colluding with some of those people, but they were certainly, who opened the door? I mean, who pulled that thing back, the barrier back?
The barrier.
If you talk to cops, though, I mean, clearly there were plenty of Trump. I mean, I've talked to people in law enforcement. They love Trump. They hate Nancy Pelosi. So I could see where some crazy guy said, "Hey, where's Nancy Pelosi's office?" They're like, "Hey, go down 2 corridors and make a right."
But we're also talking about a police force that was deliberately not reinforced or provided the equipment that they needed to ward off this oncoming wave that their leaders and other folks should have known were coming. You have people in standard uniforms out there with a mob onrushing, and I think that collusion is one thing, but I think that a number of officers were placed in a situation that they should not have been placed in. And we certainly saw extreme bravery from some officers that day. Officer Goodman, who led rioters away, protesters who became rioters and insurrectionists away from.
We also saw Capitol Police smiling as some of these people, the guy with the horns came walking into the Senate chamber. And you can see that loop anywhere, all over right-wing internet, saying, "Look, what's the big deal? Look, this wasn't violent."
But we've all seen that video of the officer being crushed in a doorway as he's in. I mean, I think that it's. I think that. There's a lot. I'm glad that they're having these hearings because I think there's layers on layers of what went wrong that day.
I'm already seeing a lot of people trying to dismiss it, though, and sit there and say it wasn't necessarily. Ron Johnson came out the other day from Wisconsin. Ron Johnson from Wisconsin, suggesting that this was not a violent insurrection, and really again trying to sweep this under the rug, and they don't want to have this bigger commission actually looking at what happened that day. They're saying this. They're also actively pushing to get some of the barriers removed from the Capitol and restart tours, despite the fact that just yesterday we find out that some of these extremist groups were actually talking about blowing up the Capitol for the State of the Union. We're not ready to go there yet. But like I said, how do we ensure that people don't forget what happened and who was responsible for it?
It's an embarrassment. I mean, it's like the woman Taylor Greene, Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Oh, my gosh.
They're embarrassments. They ignore the fact that these people are a danger. They ignore the fact that this Trump, this cultism is not ended. It's not, you didn't snap your finger and the cult has disappeared. There is a cult out there, and we're going to be dealing with that for a while.
Well, and there was all this rumor of there would be a civil war in the Republican Party, and maybe the Trump folks would split off and form their own party. No, there is no civil war in the Republican Party, and there's no need for the Trump adherents to split off to form their own party because they have one. It is the Republican Party now. I mean, we just here in Michigan Michigan Republicans elevated Michonne Maddock to their party co-chair, who is chair of the women. One of the high-ranking members of the Women for Trump group, who took buses to D.C., who has been a very vocal part of the Stop the Steal and the Unlock Michigan campaigns. I mean, we have a Senate Majority Leader who has said that the riots were a hoax. I mean, we have the Republican Party has ceded its ground to the Trump faction.
Nancy, did you see, if you were on Twitter today, you probably saw the CPAC, as CPAC is getting underway, and somebody was wheeling in this giant golden statue of Trump. It was a little bit of a caricature. It wasn't like a reverent statue. He was kind of a cartoony figure, but he was golden.
Of course.
And one of my, it's like the golden calf,
So, I mean, I was going to say, I remember that there was a thing in the Bible about that. It didn't work out
there was.
well.
Wow.
Okay. Well, speaking of Marjorie Taylor Greene, she showed that she is just, an example of a fine human being. There's a debate going on about the Equality Act, and it's a federal act, and it's about time they did this, but it would extend civil rights protections to the LGBTQ community, something we've been arguing about in Michigan, which we'll get to with Lee Chatfield in just a few minutes. So Marie Newman, who's a Democrat from Illinois, has a transgender child and put up the transgender pride flag outside of her office. And it happens to be right across the hallway from Marjorie Taylor Greene's office. So Marjorie Taylor Greene goes out of her office and puts up a sign that says there are two genders, male and female. Trust the science, in quotation marks. And then does this little thing with her hands. Yes, as Nancy just did a moment ago. I mean, how petty do you have to be to do something like this? And
extremely petty.
Well, extremely petty. But at what point do they sit there and just tell her, you just need to shut up. Stop talking. Stop talking. Stop doing anything. You're hurting the brand.
But the thing is that they won't tell her that because she actually, she keeps that little group. They want to keep them energized, and she's their, representative for the crazy. So
I mean, that is the brand, right?
Right.
Stan Van Gundy, the former Piston coach, 2014, 2018, he tweeted after the Equality Act was passed, he says, "How can anyone oppose the Equality Act? It bans discrimination based on sexual orientation or gender identification. Why would anyone support the right to discriminate? Who is harmed by someone loving someone of the same sex or identifying as other than their biology at birth?" And, I think, here it is. And the vote was, there were 3 in the House that passed, and there were only 3 Republicans who voted for the Equality Act, which means that 206 voted against it. Not just 1 or 2, but 206. And that's outrageous.
You gotta be a special kind of person to admittedly vote for discrimination. You gotta be a special kind of, there's gotta be a special thing going on there that I don't want to know anything about. But you're like, you know what? I am for discriminating against a group of people. I am all for that. And I want it on record. I want to be publicly known for the fact that I support discriminating against people.
Well, these are the same people bitching about Mr. Potato Head. I mean, have you seen this?
Yeah.
No.
So Hasbro, which makes Mr. Potato Head and Mrs. Potato Head, has just decided that now it's just Potato Head, gender neutral. They put all the pieces in. You can make your own potato any way you want to. And people are sitting there going, this is what's wrong with America today. See, here's the deal. This way they can say, hey, we are supporting this move, but at the same time, they save a ton of money in printing costs because you don't have to make separate boxes for Mrs. and Mr. anymore.
And now you only need
a ton of money.
You only need one potato bathroom.
Well, and last I checked, Mr. and Mrs. did not come with penises and vaginas. They just didn't.
Thank God.
And Santa Claus is still white. So I'm done with all of this. At that point, I'm like,
this
whatever.
is actually happening in our country right now. People are complaining about this.
I mean, remember a couple of years ago, Target decided that it was going to take the signs down that said girls and boys in the toy aisle. They still have all the same toys and all the pink Barbies are still in the same aisle. They just, stopped having the signs. It's like kids still pretty easy for them to, if they're gravitating to something, to find it. But really the big impact is, how will my child not know to feel ashamed if he wants a doll now? They took down the girl sign. He won't know that he's not supposed to want it. I don't understand why people are why that's so threatening to people. It's simply,
I thought we solved this with Free to Be You and Me when Want a Doll came out.
I had a Free to Be You and Me childhood, but it's the 70s were very different from
Rosie Greer singing "It's All Right to Cry" taught me a ton. So it's important stuff.
It's really mystifying. And that question, Alan, that you asked, who is harmed by this? There's no answer to that, and so the response has to be to redefine the question in nonsensical ways, because there is no legitimate answer to that question of who is harmed when people love each other, or when you recognize someone's right to determine their own identity.
I'll bet you ask those 200 guys, 200 men and women who voted against this, I bet 87.9% would say it's about bathrooms. That really freaks out a lot.
But they can cloak it behind this religious argument.
But that's exactly what I'm talking about, Nancy. They have to reframe it in this bathroom question, because who's harmed? Well, what about bathrooms? If people say, like, how are you supposed to explain this to your child? Well, here's what I tell my child: when you go to the bathroom, take care of your business and leave. Don't really worry about what anyone else is doing. And I feel like literally everyone, that's great advice for everyone when you're in a public bathroom.
Have people been in women's restrooms? We don't have urinals. You walk in, you go into the stall, you shut the door, you do your business, you wash your hands and you leave. I went to like a gay and lesbian dinner dance a few times in Indiana, and let me tell you what those bathrooms were like. They were full of people who had, penises, and it was totally fine. They were just working on their makeup in the mirror.
So our own Michael Lucido has just chimed in talking about Marjorie Taylor Greene and her sign that said "Trust the Science" with this comment here at the bottom of the screen: "Trust the science is laughable considering she thinks Jewish laser beams is the cause of California wildfires."
True.
Thank you, Michael. Get back to work.
I'm just like really hurt that you didn't tell me about the laser beams years ago.
I knew, but
Yeah, I thought we were friends.
Sorry, I'll give you there's a couple scoops coming up, by the way, that I'll fill you in on later. All right, so Trump's tax returns are in the hands of New York prosecutors. How's everybody feel about that?
Good.
Anything that makes him squirm. And I think really, look, the paper trails are the best cases. You have paper documents. I think all they need is somebody like Michael Cohen to sort of like piece together and explain what this is and what that is. But when you have all the paper documents, that's the best case to go with.
Okay. So I'm going to be the contrary one here. I can't get committed to, I can't get like invested in the day-to-day, ups and downs of this, because we're still like years. Would you say years away from any kind of, meaningful outcome here? And even if there were to be a case and there were to be a conviction, half the country wouldn't accept that to be a legitimate verdict. So I think we're in a very strange situation in which people have entered into their own realities. And when you look at the back to the Capitol rioters, there are certainly some of them who are motivated by whatever, but some of them genuinely believe, we have two sides of the country, and all of us think we saw the other side trying to steal an election. And there are certainly people at the top of the Republican Party who are cynically, they know better and they're cynically adopting that. But there are many, many people in the rank and file I mean, there's a large percentage of Republicans in surveys who say that they think there's something really weird happened and Joe Biden didn't win. And many of them genuinely believe this. This was very clear to me in watching the testimony in our own legislature, is that people saw things they didn't understand, like ballot signatures not being validated. Well, because they had already been validated, that was part of what the legislature allowed clerk's offices to do. But as soon as they showed up at COBA, they didn't have to do that work. But it was very clear that many of the people who saw things they didn't understand genuinely believed they had witnessed something
nefarious.
And all of that is freighted with racism and lots of historical problems, but it is genuine belief. I'm not saying it's a legitimate and genuine are two different things, right? So, so when you have this, again, half the country that believes that, the other side stole an election successfully, where's the point where you're going to change your mind on that? Where's the evidence that's going to make you reconsider? Where's the things that are going to make you not trust the man who told you that it was all happening? And how do you not fit everything else into part of the, conspiracy to bring him down? I mean, I'm pretty pessimistic about outcomes right now.
Oh, I'm not going to be upset by him having to deal with a bunch of lawyers and people going through his stuff. I don't have any problem with that.
That's fine. It's not going to have any material impact on the country, I don't think.
I think
my mental health may benefit.
Our present terrible situation.
I think we'll see a quicker turnaround than years. I think maybe a half a year at the most. I think they've been investigating for a long time. They're just looking for the right documents now to fill in the blanks there.
Fishman said didn't Fishman say a few weeks ago that these financial cases are usually pretty straightforward? You just need
it's the paper.
Yeah, they know what they're looking for now. They've been told what they're looking for. They just have to. And if I were working on the case, I'm sure there's a lot of people who are excited about it. They're willing to work weekends. They're putting a lot of resources into it. I'm sure there's a lot of people who are begging to be on the case. I think we'll see a quicker turnaround than we.
All right, real quick, we've got to move on because we're running out of time here. And I want to make sure we have time for schmucks of the week. But I do want to talk about Lee Chatfield for just a second. He, of course, left his position as Speaker of the House, term limits, gets a job for him. Boy, that salary they're going to pay him in Kalamazoo is pretty ridiculous. To go Southwest Michigan now or Southwest Michigan first, it's like the chamber for the Kalamazoo region. He resigned before really even taking the job, which we hinted at last week, Nancy Derringer and Alan Langel, that this may be coming down because I said, pretty sure I saw that job posted again, which I did. He left because he said, well, yeah, I'm trying to wrap my head around exactly why he stood by his earlier statements about, LGBTQ rights. He's like, yeah, I worked against him in the legislature all the time, but now that the chamber's for them, I'm good with it. But
Nancy had the best line. Nancy Caffrey wrote the article this week that said,
I agree.
Karma came around quick at this point, and other people ought to be aware of the fact that, the stuff they do when they're in the legislature is going to affect their political or their after career, their career after politics. And I mean, I think, first of all, it was completely disingenuous to try to get us to believe that now he had changed his mind or would, do something different than what he had advocated and done the whole time he was in the legislature. And so, unfortunately, I think, or fortunately, you got to, you take a position like that, there's going to be some things you're not, going to get because of it. And so, I don't know that he quit as much as they kind of sort of slowly guided him out because nobody wanted to do business with him anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's messed up that they thought that this was going to be a reasonable hire in the first place, but
very weird.
I mean, it just was the revolving door. I mean,
someone I know asked me, if people can't change their positions, then what is their incentive to ever change? And I said, that's an excellent question that applies in a lot of situations, but not, I don't think, in this one.
No.
Because when you look at his resignation letter posted to Twitter, he very clearly said it was a mess. It went back and forth between saying, well, I can support, LGBT rights now, even though I didn't then, and I'm not going to apologize for my beliefs, which are sincere, and I'm not going to hide from my beliefs or the things that I believe. He was very clear that these are sincerely held beliefs. And so to me, like, I will now work for these things that I'm going to make it clear that I don't, believe are that's not to me a genuine shift in a position. That's maybe someone who wants to hold on to a highly paid job.
It was also very clear that whatever he taught at that Christian school that he used to teach at before he came down here to the legislature, it wasn't English composition.
I mean,
that letter was ridiculous. It was just,
I mean, he said he also said, during his 2014 campaign that, asking Christians to go beyond, for many Christians, going beyond tolerating LGBT people is a bridge too far. And I also, frankly, I kind of resent that because I'm Presbyterian and, I really,
for me, buddy.
There's a lot of Christian denominations that don't rabidly hate LGBT people and have ordained ministers, and it really is personally annoys me when people presume to speak as though Christianity is a monolith. You remember that part where Jesus said, "Love one another," unless I don't. That's not a part.
Well, okay. Well, hold that thought, everybody. And now it's time for Deadline Detroit's nominees for Schmuck of the Week. Look at that fancy graphic we made. Schmuck of the Week time here on the Craig Folly Show, the week that was on Deadline Detroit. I've got a couple of them. So should I go first and then loop back around, or does somebody else want to lead us off this week?
Go. You're in charge. You go first.
Okay, let's go. Here's my first one. This is a guy named Jason Ravensborg. He is, of course, the Attorney General in South Dakota. Now, I don't know if you heard about this guy.
I did.
But in September, he was driving down the road and hit a man while driving in September. But he said, no, I don't know what I hit. I think it might have been a deer or something like that. Well, no, because what they found in the guy's car were the glasses that belonged to the person that he hit. And so clearly the man's face came through the windshield. And this guy says, I don't know what I hit, but the victim's glasses were in your car.
You mean the reindeer's glasses?
Reindeer's glasses.
Yeah. So on Tuesday, a bipartisan group of lawmakers filed articles of impeachment against him. He's since been charged with 3 misdemeanors. But I have a feeling it's going to go further than that. But the Attorney General, the top law enforcement officer in that state, basically caught lying after a hit and run. So pretty bad stuff.
He didn't know what he hit because he was pouring another drink into the cup in the cup.
Either way, I mean, they found the guy's glasses in the car. He's like, I don't know what he hit. Well, clearly.
I mean, that suggests that the guy came all the way through the windshield and made a hole. I mean, you know what safety glass does when it did shatters. Amazing. So
and then he went home.
That's a good one.
That's one. All right. Who's next?
I'll keep with the driving theme and sort of the response, who should be held to a higher standard, and stay local with our Detroit firefighter who responded to a scene and was clearly drunk when he responded and hit a parked car on the way. I guess they had gone to a party in the vehicle, I think in the fire truck or one of the fire vehicles.
In the firehouse.
In the firehouse. Oh, okay. Yeah. And then
he was in the firehouse.
Call comes in and they jump in the fire truck and, start driving down Detroit streets.
Yeah, that's one of those situations where, the mayor wakes up, Portia, as you know, and just sort of shakes his head.
And
gets on the phone and just says, what the hell happened here?
Right. Didn't anybody in the house just say, dude, not you. You don't get to respond this time. The rest of us will take this call, or somebody.
I wonder if there's a pass system where they can say, we can't take this because we're all drunk. Can the next closest
another
house handle this one? Yeah.
All right. Yeah. There's 2. Who wants to go next? Alan Lengel. Who do you got?
I'm going to go with my man Ted Cruz, who
he's nominated every week.
Who not only gave a speech at the CPAC, talking or mentioned at CPAC, said that Orlando is nice, not as nice as Cancun. And then he went on to mock masks and said, we're going to wear masks for the next 300 years. And by the way, not just one mask, 2, 3, 4. You can't have too many masks. How much virtue do you want to signal?
Oh, what a swell guy.
For a guy who was educated, I guess, at Princeton and Harvard Law, it's really amazing how ignorant
And then he prostrated himself before the golden idol of Trump and, brushed off his hands.
And ceremoniously burned his mask.
And then mocked his own misfortune and stupidity in making that trip to Cancun, because Texas is still messed up. We didn't even get into Texas today. It is still not fixed down there in any way, shape, or form.
I'm just going to say, if my husband was a U.S. Senator and Donald Trump said some things like that about Ted Cruz's wife during the campaign, and my husband cozied up to him later, my husband and I would not be in what you might call
marital bliss.
Marital bliss. She also, though, is the wife who sent out texts to her friends like, hey, we're all going and we got rooms at the Ritz-Carlton and it is going to be really nice, so let's all go. And those same friends were like, yes, I will forward those text messages to whomever wants them. So
exactly. That's how much they love them.
Portia, so maybe her firm of marital bliss or not marital bliss is throwing him under the bus.
That is exactly what stuck out to me in that story. Is like you're texting. Like I feel like if I texted you and said, I don't know, let's blow out of town this weekend, you wouldn't be like, I gotta send this to the
news media.
And also keep in mind that the Cruz home, from what I saw in the news, the shots from the sidewalk, is fairly large, and Mrs. Cruz may well sleep in a different bedroom, like Mrs. Trump did. So because she likes to read.
That's why you buy a mansion, right?
Yeah.
So we can have those resting rooms. All right, you want to go last? All right. So Nancy, I know that you love so much this section of the program.
I still like calling people schmucks. I write things trying to change their minds, and I feel like if I call someone a schmuck, then why are they going to listen to me? So I'll pass. I'll let somebody else do that.
All right. Well, I've got two.
Cruz is not going to listen to you.
That's right. Well, I've got two. Here's my favorite. This is a guy. He was one of the rioters at the Capitol. His name is Richard Machete. And here's the great thing. He's taking all sorts of film. He's got all sorts of video, and he's calling his ex-girlfriend. He takes a break from getting tear gassed for a little while. He calls his ex-girlfriend. I don't know what kind of terms they're on, but he's like, I'm at the Capitol. Check this out. And she says, hey, don't get hurt. What are you doing there? This looks really bad. They get in some sort of discussion about the election. And he says, hey, look, if you think this election wasn't stolen, you're a moron. So he called his ex-girlfriend a moron, and she immediately the next day called the FBI and said, hey, here's a bunch of videos that this guy sent me of him breaking into the Capitol. So lesson here, and definitely schmuck worthy, don't call the lady in your life a moron.
Okay, that guy's a schmuck.
Yes, right. There you go. There you go. See, that was my for Nancy. I will find one like that for you every time you're on, so you don't actually have to do it. I promise. Okay. I can do that going forward because I have no problem with that guy. He's just stupid. I mean, there you go. Talk about a moron. That's not a good thing. All right, Nancy Derringer, you get to finish this off.
I also have two. I was going to give it to have it shared by Senators Tom Barrett of Charlotte and Jim Runestad of White Lake, both Republicans, who did not want the vaccines. Apparently think Detroit's getting too many COVID vaccines, and they don't want them distributed on the basis of social justice.
I saw that, yeah.
But I have decided, in the spirit of non-partisanship, I believe that the real schmuck of the week for me has to be the person who shot Lady Gaga's dog walker 3 times and stole 2 of her beloved French bulldogs, and they have still not yet been found. But I have a feeling, since she offered a $500,000 no questions asked reward, they will be very soon.
Hey, Bob, where'd you get those puppies?
But she offered a $500,000 reward for the return of her dogs, no questions asked. Not for information about who literally shot her employee.
Presumably, they are one and the same. So
right, but she's asking for the return of the dogs, no questions asked.
I guarantee you that if somebody returns those dogs to her and tries to collect the $500,000, the police will have some questions.
Forget the attempted murder charges. We're willing to waive those for the dog.
But the offer she's putting out there, to me, does centers not the actual human being who was shot, which is, gross.
All right. Well, we've got to wrap
about how you can quit from Lady Gaga's employment now because your life is at risk if you own her dogs. I mean, or you walking her dogs. Like, I know the housekeeper and everybody else, the groundskeeper, whatever she has. Like, I'm okay without working for you. Like, I
want to deep dive into the world of purebred pet theft, because I think it's a real thing. A woman who worked in our building several years ago, her dog was stolen from her backyard. It was an adorable little, I don't remember, little fuzzy little cute dog, but it was a purebred dog. And so there's people who steal dogs because they want to do dog fighting and stuff. But I think there's like a lucrative resale market on purebred animals. And she got it returned to her because someone bought it from a person who was legitimately selling it as a pet. I mean, not like a store, but saying they were a breeder or something. And then the buyer saw one of the signs up that this wonderful woman I work with had put up saying, please return my pet, and realized he had bought this stolen dog and took it back to her, which, he
that was nice of him.
Yeah. Really good person. Knew he wasn't getting his money back, knew that he couldn't keep this dog. He needed to return it to his owner.
Gaga had chips in those dogs. So whoever takes that dog to the vet, they're going to be found out eventually. It's going to happen.
Well, that's why we need the deep dive into the world of purebred pet theft.
All right. So Monday on the Craig Foley Show, Nancy Keffer and Craig Foley are going to break down the loop. Just kidding. We'll do that another day because we do have to wrap this up. I would like to thank my guests for being here today. Portia Roberson, CEO of Focus Hope. Thank you so much for being here. We always enjoy having you with us. Nancy Keffer of the Detroit Free Press. Of course. Thank you for being here as well. And Nancy Derringer and Alan Lengel of Deadline Detroit. We appreciate you both as always. And thanks to Lynette Shrimphouse for sponsoring this program. It's a big deal. And thanks to all of you for watching. Have a fantastic weekend. And Alan,
stay home safely.
The Craig Foley Show on Deadline Detroit is made possible in part by Lynette Shrimphouse, located in Highland Park. It's Metro Detroit's premier destination, serving juicy fried shrimp, fish, and wings alongside soul food sides and new additions to the menu like turkey tacos and desserts. Located at 13548 Woodward in Highland Park, just north of the Davidson, Lynette's is open for takeaway noon to 8 Tuesday and Thursday, noon to 10 p.m. Friday and Saturday, and noon to 5 p.m. on Sunday. Call now, get some Lynette's.